Internet outrage has destroyed the way we communicate. Everyone's angry, everyone's canceled, and nobody is allowed to think for themselves. So we're here to fix that. Welcome to Subtweet THIS.
Hey everyone, what's going on? My name is Gothix and welcome back to another episode of Subtweet THIS. Today we have a special guest, Clifton Duncan, an actor, by the way. Hello, Clifton. Hello.
Hello, everybody.
He's like, I just woke up.
I did. I woke up just like this. But it's a pleasure to meet you all. Thank you for having me and taking the time to talk to me on this incredible Sunday.
Oh yes, fabulous. So listen, for those of that don't know who you are, tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Well, sure. My name is Clifton Duncan. I've been an actor for 20 years. I spent 15 of that in New York. I graduated from the New York University Graduate Acting Program, which is a very prestigious conservatory. It's given us some alumni such as Denai Guerrera, Sterling Brown, and Mahershala Ali. They went to the same program. We weren't there at the same time, but I worked on Broadway, Off-Broadway, at the top theaters around the country, guest starred in several television series, some award nominations. I don't talk very much about my acting. It's sort of like, it's my job. But it is funny to me when people online try to be like, well, you're just some mediocre person. It's like, well, no, you can actually, I have the receipts. You can Google reviews going back almost 20 years of notices, from the New York Times or Entertainment Weekly or any of these other, I guess we call them legacy media outlets that we love so much right now.
Yeah.
I've got a pedigree. I've got, I've done well for myself, and then everything shut down. So now I'm in a different city that's not New York, and starting my life. I feel like I'm kind of starting over in a weird sense, but we can get into the reasons why. Later on, if you choose.
Hold on. Could you tell us some of the Broadway shows that you've been on? Maybe I might have seen one.
Right. Well, I don't know if you've seen it, but I did a beloved British comedy called The Play That Goes Wrong. The British
Goes Wrong.
Right. So it's a how do I explain it? It's a British farce. So people will call it low comedy, but it was quite sophisticated. It was created by this British troupe, and it went on to the West End basically. Then J.J. Abrams saw it and he decided he wanted to bring it to Broadway. So the British cast and the creators did it for about 6 months, and then they brought in an American cast that replaced them. And so I was part of the American cast, full accent and everything. And we ran for a long time, but then I injured myself, and I had to leave. So that is my main claim to fame. I can give you a long list of Broadway shows that I almost got in, but did not get.
Oh, wouldn't that hurt?
We don't need those reminders.
Well, that's kind of part of the industry. People, I feel like a lot of people really underestimate the luck factor. Hugh Jackman was not the first choice for Wolverine. There was somebody that wasn't available. And Hugh, who himself is a great performer, slotted in there. So we're all at the casino, essentially. At a certain point, everyone is gifted. Everyone is talented. The fact that it took Mahershala Ali so long I think he got out of NYU in the early 2000s. And so it's only been within the last few years that we've known who he is. No one knew who Morgan Freeman was till he was in his 40s. So, it's a long game for a lot of people. And I think people don't realize that, every time you get an audition or an appointment or whatever, you're almost purchasing a lottery ticket, or you're going up to, the tables or the slot machine or whatever. And, and some people don't want to face this, but, there are brilliant people that you have never heard of and that you never will hear of. And we all know that there's tons of mediocre people that have careers. So, it's not as cut and dry as, are you talented or are you not? A lot of it is just straight up tenacity. It's a game of attrition, or a war of attrition. And those who stick around longest tend to reap the most benefit.
I hear that.
That's such a great take, or interesting one. With it being like a lottery, because that is true. A lot of people, I feel like it just takes that one role, and it's just like, okay, wait, this person's been around for a long time.
That's always what it is. That's all, it's one job that, there are some people, I have a classmate who, won a Tony Award a year after she got out of school. I have another classmate who left, and, she's a pretty white girl. So we knew she was going to be all right. But But it's, I have the sort of numbers I have in my phone, people I can text. It's at a certain point, especially within the past few years. I'm starring across, Tony-winning actors and movie stars, and doing workshops and readings. And at a certain point, it's like, these are all people. They're extraordinary people, or they're extraordinarily gifted at one or two things, and we like to watch them, which is why we pay time and money to see them. But at a certain point, you're just like, all right, everyone's good at a certain level, and the person you're shaking hands with or condescending to today, in the next week they can book that television series or that movie role that starts everything off. So it's a very bizarre industry that's not necessarily that doesn't really honor merit as much as one might hope, which might explain some of the political leanings of much of the industry.
Yeah. So you actually said you said a few things that I want to actually touch base on. So first of all, you did say that you don't normally talk about like the fact that you act because it is your job. Is acting like something that you have always wanted to pursue, or were there other things that were along the way?
Well, it's sort of a theme in my life. I'm sort of an odd duck and an outsider in many ways. So, my life would have been so much easier and less full of strife if I had been someone who was like, oh my God, I saw a production of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat when I was 6 years old, and I just had to do this for the rest of my life. Like, I'm not one of those kids, Like I was going to be an illustrator, and I was into music and a little bit of writing, fiction and nonfiction. I was an artsy kid. And then it just, long story short, it just turned out that I was sort of good at it. I never had stage fright. It was never a thing that bothered me. I've seen kids break down and cry just from being on stage. That was never a thing for me. It was sort of like a duck to water. And it took me a long time, actually, to become comfortable calling myself an actor, because, let's be, it's not really a respectable profession that's highly regarded. Let's be real. It used to be, I want to say back in the 1600s, where we weren't even allowed to be buried in the same cemetery. Right. Or in a regular cemetery with regular people. So, it's a profession that has a low entry point. There is a skill and a craft to it. The analogy I'd make is that some people learn how to build houses. I learned how to build characters. So there is a technique to constructing it. And there's a reason why people like Tom Cruise or Denzel Washington have been around for so long, because they're just masters at what they do. But I'm somebody who, I guess I don't think that I'm super special for doing what I do any more than I think, if you're an agriculturalist or a doctor or whatever, I think it's cool that, if you have that skill set, but I don't think that you're some sort of special, mighty individual that should be anointed above the rest of us. And I think a lot of actors, and part of it is the culture of the industry. I think, we are, at least the school that I went to, it's very much, we are actors, and we are artists and citizens of the world who are, sort of on the outside, and we're making commentary on the broader society, and that's our duty as artists. And there is some efficacy to that. And when you talk about, say Dadaism or postmodernism, as an artist or a creative person, it is useful to be able to think outside the box in those terms. But at the end of the day, I just feel like, I'm just a guy. I'm a guy who speaks well, and I have a particular. We're supposed to Liam Neeson quote. I have a particular set of skills, and that's what I do, and I happen to enjoy it, and I happen to be fortunate enough to work more than most actors do. Unemployment is a feature, not a bug, in this industry, and I've since moving to Atlanta, that's the first time I've needed to have a quote unquote regular job in almost in over half a decade. So I've been very lucky in many respects, but it's not something that I don't think it's that big of a deal. I also don't like bragging and boasting about myself either. So that's why I don't talk about it that much.
Well, the reason that I asked, and it also ties into my next question, is because I do see that a lot of these like non-conventional jobs, right? You got like maybe a live streamer or an actor or a singer. I feel like a lot of people, specifically in the minority spectrum, may feel like these fields are harder to get into. And you did say that there was a girl that was in school with you and you said, oh, well, she's white, she'll be fine. So do you find that that is something that is true in the acting sphere? Is it harder for Black people to make it?
Well, you know what? This is a question that I've really been wrestling with. You know, what role does and has my race played in terms of my career? And I think on balance, for someone like me, it's actually benefited me more than it's held me back. But the thing about me is that my skill set, you know, I mean, I've always been someone who's been I've never been put off by language or complex language. So if you're talking about Shakespeare or, you know, Moliere or the Greek tragedies, which we call heightened texts, you know, those don't bother me. So I also am a singer. So if I'm, you know, if the latest Tyler Perry movie isn't casting, I can still carry a Broadway musical or a Shakespeare play or a restoration British comedy, you know, with equal aplomb. And that's my skill set, and that is what has allowed me to remain as employable as I've been in my estimation. So when I see people that are complaining that, you know, the industry is stacked against them, I think to myself, well, you know, my own experience has been, well, when I wanted to do a musical, I worked on I worked with a singing coach, and then that's when I began to establish myself as a singing actor of note in New York City, which is not easy to do. There's a lot of unbelievable people in that city. When I wanted to work more on camera, I focused more on that and improving, and I went from 0 guest stars in 1 year to guest starring for 3 of the major broadcast networks. So my philosophy has always been, if you want to do something, then you work on improving at doing it. So if you have an accent or some kind of regionalism, or if the way that you speak isn't quite as polished, you know, work on that stuff, because then not only will it open up your access to, you know, the great Shakespearean canon or other types of roles you wouldn't necessarily be up for, but in the TV realm, you know, if you're able to handle Shakespeare, then when you're handed a piece of material from a legal drama or a medical drama, which has a lot of complex jargon and language, you're unfazed by it. And on top of that, you know how to activate it and make it interesting and compelling. So, you know, my attitude is just do the work and put in the time. If you know what you're doing and you're trained and you've put in the time to hone your craft, then, you know, my opinion is that the sky's the limit. I mean, the only thing is that, you know, we live in a white majority country. And the industry is going to reflect that. But I think that's less of a factor now, and I think the industry is really slow in catching up to this. You know, whatever the old model was of, you know, there's a system and there's television and there's Hollywood. I mean, I think that's sort of dying now. I mean, we all have smartphones, you know, we can get ring lights, we can get decent audio material or equipment and make our own work. So I guess to answer your question more succinctly, I think it is a factor. It's hard to tell how much it is, but I think it's less of a factor when you put in the time and the work to make yourself as hireable and as employable as you can be. But I think it's less of a factor now because you don't really necessarily have to wait for the quote unquote industry to notice you. I mean, Issa Rae, you know, did a web series on YouTube before she got picked up by Shonda Rhimes, you know, so I mean, Tyler Perry, and people have lots of criticisms about his content and his material. But he has $1 billion studio right now here in Atlanta, and, you know, he's still working. So, right. You know, there are people that are making their own way. I mean, look what Shonda Rhimes has been able to do as well. She's one of the most powerful women in television. So people are for all the people complaining that they can't make it, there seems to be a whole lot of people who are busting through and doing just fine. I'm someone who made the decision back in like 2007 that I was going to stop using my race as a crutch. And I think that really changed my trajectory in a lot of ways, politically, personally, and professionally.
So I was gonna ask, like, on top of that, with you being a black man and saying, and you're pretty much saying like your color has not prevented you from getting any roles. Have you ever like I don't even know how to phrase the question. Have you ever been in a situation where like you approach for a particular role because of your skin color?
Stereotype.
On that, like, were you stereotype casting? Like, oh, we're looking for a black man from the age of X to X to portray this kind of character and stuff. Like, did you ever see yourself being called for those roles because of your skin color?
Yeah, but it's not. This is what I mean by I feel like it's been an advantage for me because it's weird because it's not that they're looking for, you know, I mean, like the old argument is, all they see us as are thugs or criminals or whatever. So those are the only roles I can get. I don't know if any of you have seen Robert Townsend's Hollywood Shuffle, a movie made in the 80s. If you haven't, I highly recommend it because it's hilarious. And it's just a spoof where, Robert Townsend is playing an actor, in Hollywood in the 80s, and he's, grappling with, a racist industry. And I'm not going to spoil it, but I mean, there's some great skits about black acting school and all kinds of things. But I think that's an argument that's, 20, 30 years old now. I think for my money now, it's less about stereotyping and it's more about the people who are doing the producing and the casting saying, oh, we want a black person here. And it's less about leaving it to add a little bit of nuance to it. I know we hate nuance these days, but I mean, it's definitely better than the alternative of, well, we're just not going to pay any attention at all to these people. But then on the other hand, it's sort of strange where it's like, well, we're specifically looking for a black person to fill this role because we feel like we need to put a black person in this role. You know what I'm saying? Like there's this attitude where I need a black, you know what I mean? So I'm gonna put this here. And it's nice that they're looking out for us in that way. But from my perspective, what tends to happen, and this is where this sort of progressive ideology kind of clashes with itself, because there's like for instance, there's one role that I read for what's like, I go in for a lot of military guys, you know what I mean, and FBI or combatants, these kinds of things. And there's one scene, it's which is kind of fun. But then you read these roles where you're this character, and they're intelligent and they're assertive and they're complex. They have all these things, but then they get into a fight with the 5'3" white co-star, and they get their ass kicked. So it's like, okay, you're pushing the girl power aspect of it, which is fine, I guess. But then at the same time, you're emasculating this black male character, and that's one of the complaints for decades now, is that you have these sort of dickless, Gordon Good brothers who are just kind of there holding space to make to make the producers feel better about themselves, and that they're earning their liberal bona fides by having a black person there. But there's rarely nuance there. And if you try to inject some, it's like black is too broad in general. Is this person Sudanese? Are they Nigerian? Are they Jamaican? Are they Trinidadian? Are they black Dominican? Are they black Cuban or Afro-Cuban? And then what specific things does that mean about the character? How can I embellish the character or do detail work in that specific way? But if you try to introduce, maybe just a fleck of a Nigerian accent, or maybe you decide your character was born and raised in Brooklyn to a Jamaican family, you try to put those elements in there, they don't understand that. So on one hand, they're trying to make this push to be more inclusive, but on the other hand, it's very superficial because they don't quite, and I'm saying I'm not trying to be insulting to the people that are producing and casting all these shows, but it's just the black characters that I go in now for are either they're either too perfect or they just go to somebody else. But it's just this attitude. I think people are so afraid of portraying people in a negative light that like I wonder if a show like The Wire would ever be produced today. Because there's a bunch of drug dealers and criminals that we follow. But Omar became iconic. We all learned who Idris Elba was because he played Stringer Bell. And it's like, wait a minute. That guy sounds like the chimney sweep from Mary Poppins, but he's playing this hardened Baltimore killer. So it's a tough question to answer. I've also been in situations where people have said to me, I've been chased for roles. I was supposed to do this. There was a production of a play called The Secret Garden, which is based on the novel of the same name, which I highly recommend to any of you if you're planning on having children or have them already. Read that book to them. It's so beautiful. And they were doing a production of it, a revival that was supposed to go to Broadway. They cast me in one of the leads, and they really chased me for it. And then I sort of came to find out that they just wanted a black person to be in that lead role. One of the reasons I think was because they had a black woman who was a friend of mine who was playing the maid. Now the maid in this particular novel and show, it's a great role. But I think they looked around and they were like, well, we got this black woman playing the maid, and it's a comedic role, and she's singing really hard. So I guess we should have a black person to play the master of the estate, who's her boss. You know, and yeah, well, that's what it is. And you know, there's a point where someone said to me, like, the character I was playing has a humpback, and I'm not going to get into too many of the details of the story, but you know, but at one point, the director pulls me aside, and he was like, you know, because I kind of was attacking it like, you know, this is a Shakespeare reference, but Richard III, who is like, you know, now is the winter of our discontent, and the director was like, you know, you don't need to really do all of that, because we want to play with it where the disability is more in his head. And he says to me, he's like, well, I think, he's a British guy, he's like, well, I think that perhaps your disability, people will view your skin color as more of a disability. And there was a moment where I just looked at him. Yeah, right. So I looked at him, and we just looked, and you could tell that the moment was just awkward. And this is where it clicked for me. I was like, okay, there were a bunch of conversations among the creative and production teams that said, like, we know what we can do to combat charges of racism in this production. We'll have a black guy that
wow.
people will view as disabled anyway, because he's black. Like you.
That is ridiculous.
You know, but this is what I mean. Like,
right.
these sort of progressive ideals, they all cross over each other. They're so zealous about, you know, portraying these these positive portrayals of black people or whatever. But then they end up tripping over themselves in other ways. So it's actually kind of amusing to me. It used to make me mad, but now it's really funny.
I want to go a little bit into the fact of I found you on Twitter, and when I found you initially, your username on Twitter said notable exception on it. So I would like to know, and of course you don't have to share it if you want, but like, do you have a political affiliation, and has it affected your craft in any way?
No, I don't have a political affiliation. I left the Democratic Party, or I deregistered from the Democratic Party two summers ago. You know,
was there a particular reason why you did that?
Because they're trash.
Well, that's just straight to the point. All right.
And well, you know, and side note, I mean, it's so refreshing being outside of New York, you know, and being in a place like Atlanta, because, you know, I mean, I've been hanging out with a bunch of my younger brother's friends. You know, he's a musician and an artist, and, you know, and the level of entrepreneurship and I think more heterodox thinking down here is very heartening to me, and I feel like, you know, at least in the circles I travel in, it doesn't really exist in New York. But you know, to go back to your question, it hasn't affected me yet. I feel like the storm is coming. You know, I feel like as soon as people see my Twitter account, they're going to be like, oh, you know, who is this person? But my struggle has been for a long time. I mean, you know, on Facebook, before I left that, which is also trash, years ago, I posted some rant about being a frustrated liberal. And this is before the so-called IDW, you know, sort of launched off, and before, before the culture war really became really like roared to life in a huge way. And I said, there's obviously an orthodoxy that you have to follow. I mean, I'm an atheist as well. So I'm looking at this, I'm like, this looks to me like a secular religion. There's an orthodoxy that you have to follow. You know, it's rife with contradictions. It seems like in many ways a faith-based belief, and I can't sign on with that. And part of my issue is that as a part of my actor training, we were trained that curiosity and empathy are two of our biggest tools as actors. You know, I mean, the classic example is, you know, if you have to play Hitler, you have to find some kind of compassion for him. Otherwise, you can't play the character. You'll just be judging them the whole time. So when I see a bunch of people who are calling themselves actors or artists who are exercising zero curiosity or zero empathy as far as different viewpoints, different ideas, different ideologies, it really bothers me. And I think that sort of closed-mindedness is going to destroy the industry in the long run. And for me, the impact that it has had so far is that, you know, I feel like I've been living a double life. One of the paradoxes of acting is that, you know, in order to play other people, you have to really be, you have to really know yourself. What is it that makes you yourself angry? What is it that makes you yourself, you know, filled with lust or passion or rage or whatever? And you can, you know, use your own human experience that we all have, that's universal, you know, in service of whatever character you're playing. And I just will spend years and years in these rehearsal rooms listening to people say the most asinine things and, stopping rehearsals to look at, especially after Trump was elected, they would stop rehearsal every 10 minutes to look at some New York Times headline. Did you see what Trump did now? And I'm just like, dude, I just want to rehearse this fucking musical. Can we please just learn the choreography and not talk about, the problems of the world, which you're getting through this really skewed lens? And I think that, I've been really silent on Twitter lately. And part of the reason is just that, I have that thing inside of me where I'm just like, what's going to happen if I say this? Am I going to end up on some list somewhere? Just as a matter of fact, just the other day, there was a performer named Chad Kimball, who was on Broadway in a long running show called Memphis. I think he was nominated for a Tony if he didn't win, but Governor Jay Inslee of Washington, I believe, he put down these orders where he's like, you can't sing in church, basically. And Chad Kimball, who I don't have any personal relationship with, but he tweeted like, you are not going to infringe upon my ability to sing and worship my God. And pretty much all of the industry just dragged him on Twitter. I don't want to share a rehearsal room with you. You're being irresponsible. I hope you die, yada, yada, yada. So there is a huge lack of, I'm going to go back to curiosity and empathy or the ability or even desire to understand where others are coming from. And, these sorts of viewpoints, this narrow worldview, it's going to affect what kind of scripts get greenlit. It's going to affect what kind of projects are produced. It's going to affect what kind of people get hired on any particular project. This is an industry that's heavily based on relationships. And if people think that you don't, share their worldview or whatever, then, you're not going to be on whatever team, for whatever project is being cast. So I think there's a lot of people who just who just bite their tongues and they don't say anything, even if they don't agree completely with the paradigm or the zeitgeist. And, I have a few friends that I found along the way, and, we speak in hushed tones. It's like, are you reading the new Jordan Peterson book? Yeah, I'm reading it too. Yeah, it's really good. I really enjoy it. It's really helping me a lot. It's changing my life. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
back to you know what I mean?
A secret club, secret meetings.
It's sad that it has to be like that.
Yeah.
It's sad, especially in an arts industry. We're supposed to be creatives. We're supposed to be looking at things from all angles. We're supposed to be tackling, all these issues.
I hear the baby. Come on, I need to see the baby.
It's her name is Saya. She's not my baby. I'm completely
it's not my
advocating her responsibility.
It's not my baby.
How many black men have we seen? I'm not going to go there. I hope I answered your question though. I feel like it's
no, you did.
Did I mean? Well, I said something. I don't know.
Yeah, no. Like because like I have seen the reason that I asked is because I'm obviously in like the streaming and content creator sphere. And that's something that I noticed when people were coming out with their political affiliation or saying that they're not going to vote for Biden, for example. A lot of people were openly just being ostracized, saying like, everybody unfollow this person, don't watch this person's content, like just that really weird mob mentality. But what's really interesting is the assumption that everyone in your circle automatically thinks like you anyway. I have people tell me that they were approached by other people trying to get them to disassociate themselves from me because of my affiliation or lack thereof with the Democrat side. And I'm like, just that idea that you think everybody aligns with your view of the world is bizarre to me. And I do agree that I think that it's going to end up poisoning this type of industry, this creative industry. Just based on things that I find just very minuscule. Like political affiliation to me is so minuscule.
I'm very interested about what's going on in the comic book industry right now. And
don't even get started with that fucking nonsense of a shit show right now.
Well, it's nuts, isn't it? Because you see, and this is why I began to speak up more, because I feel like the same thing is going to happen to the entertainment industry at large, where you have people who are being hounded out of the industry for like Vanessa said, it's ideological, political nonsense that should not matter. Nobody picks up a comic book and it's like, or watches a movie and say, I wonder who the producers voted for. Like nobody was watching. When I was ugly crying during Avengers Endgame, the third or fourth time, I wasn't sitting there being like, well, Mark Ruffalo said some things about socialism. Like I don't give a fuck. You know what I mean? I just don't care. I just don't care. No one is buying. No one's gonna pick up I'm thinking about Diggable Planets or whatever. I mean, they openly talk about reading Marx in some of their songs, and I'm like, I'm not going to be like, well, I'm not going to listen to it, because they reference Karl Marx in one song. It's just it's so ridiculous. But what I notice in the comic book industry is that the main industry itself seems to be collapsing. But then you have these other people who are going outside the system, and they're making money. They're hiring people. They're doing just fine. So I'm thinking to myself, you can't keep alienating your audiences, who are our customers. That's the thing about it. You can't continue to insult and denigrate half your audience base and expect them to stick around. You can't expect them. You can't keep injecting your activism into. That's the thing now. It's more activism than it is art. And they're not really telling stories as much as they are, preaching to people. And it's like, well, if people want to be preached to, then they will go to church. They don't want to go to the movies, or go to the theater, or watch TV and see these kinds of things. And my fear is that, I see people all the time who are saying, I don't watch TV anymore. I don't go to the movies. I just stopped watching this. I stopped watching that. You see, all these franchises that are losing money or viewership, Star Trek, Star Wars, Doctor Who, these shows are alienating their fan bases. And I feel like, there's going to be there has to be some sort of collapse or a bubble. I mean, someone made the great point is that, could our industry even sustain itself without support from the Chinese market at this point? Is there enough domestic support from Americans to be able to uphold the industry? And I just don't know if that's true right now. And it just doesn't have to be that way.
It's funny that you say that. You mentioned that, like how these industries and franchises who like alienate their fans. And we had the perfect example with if you look at the Charlie's Angels Full Throttle movie that came out, she deliberately said, this movie is not for men. This is not a man movie. But then no men should be watching this movie.
For not when the movie,
when it failed and sucked. When the movie was a dog shit movie. I watched it. I was like, this movie fucking is trash. Like all it was pushing was like man bad, man bad, man bad. It's like I didn't want to see man bad. I want to see action. Like I don't like going to watch a movie and see real life issues going on because I try to get away from that. Like Black Panther, good movie, but I didn't call it the best movie because like I didn't want to see them talk about modern day problems. Like I don't give a fuck what's going on in my hood because I live in the hood and I see it every day. Now you got a main villain. His whole thing was, you guys are not helping out black people who are suffering in America and like the modern world. Is like, yeah, because Wakanda don't fuck with that shit. I don't care about this problem. I care about seeing Black Panther fight a supervillain. I don't need Black Panther to be fighting a woke ass person. That's what it was. Killmonger was woke, and he came over there and started messing with other people. And like, it's so annoying that Doctor Who is failing because they keep kind of cater to these people who constantly crying about things. They're crying about lack of representation. Why I'm not this doesn't fit my ideology, so I'm not going to watch it. When you have the fans saying, well, just let them do what they want. They're the creators, they're the directors. Let them produce and direct and write how they want. We, the fans, will like it. A perfect example, look at the Sonic movie. When the Sonic movie first released, everybody was like, this shit is horrible. Like, we would not watch this movie. They said, stop, redo it. Look, Sonic did amazing. Because they listen to the fans. When you listen to your fans, the people who are actually consuming your product, you're going to get your money. The Mandalorian, another perfect example. People complain about, the female characters have breastplate armor and like it shows their curves. It's like, yeah, it's been like that since the animated series. What are you fucking talking about?
They have boobs.
Let them make this like,
but they don't know what they're talking about. These people never know what they're talking about. That's what's so frustrating to me because like, you go back to Black Panther as an example. It's like, or Captain Marvel. Here's the first, XXX to do this or whatever. And it's like, dude, have we forgotten?
No, it's not.
Have we forgotten Wesley Snipes, who was one of the hugest action stars in the late 90s and early 2000s? And he's an amazing actor, by the way. On top of all of that.
Meteor Man, Blank Man.
I was going to say Blank Man, but I was like, I don't know about Blank Man.
Blank Man was great.
It doesn't matter. But here's the thing. Say what you want about Blank Man could have been a spoof movie or whatever. It was still a black man growing up in an area where he was like, I don't feel safe. I hate it here. I have intelligence and I'm being made fun of because I'm smart. So I'm gonna use my intelligence and my love of comics to save my own neighborhood. Meteor Man.
Wow, yeah.
Grew up in a damaged area. He was a principal or a teacher, and he was getting beat up and picked on by his students. And he was tired, got the powers, and changed this area around. Blade, black vampire killing white vampires. How could you not love that movie if you're so against white people being this stuff? Look, and you know, it's just so crazy. But then they cry and say they want these representations in the movies and comics, but don't buy it. People complain about, we want this kind of character, we want that kind of character. Here's that character now. Oh, the comic books sales fail. The products, it just fails. But this is what you guys wanted. Don't cater to the people because they're crying.
They're trying to appeal to an audience that don't, that are not really the consumers. I mean, when you say that it's attacking, like, you know, the comic book industry, you know, I think every industry it's just like eventually going to happen. We see it in video game industry. That's becoming more woke too. And then you see it with comics, and then you just see it with entertainment in general. And it's exhausting to see. I mean, I played the Spider-Man game and I saw a random BLM mural just trying to get a costume, and I was just like, wow, why? Like, why?
That's so weird to me.
And his dad is a cop, which is even funnier. Like,
yeah.
Did they leave that part out, that his dad was a cop that died?
Yeah.
Did they leave that?
I mean, like, it was in the first game, but still, like.
Well, you know, and this goes, you know, it goes back into, you know, listening to people who are complaining, and you know, Eric Weinstein has this great concept called the gated institutional narrative, or the GIN, and it's all these different, you know, it's these media outlets and these other elites who are just having conversations with each other, basically, and they're not really including, you know, the regular people, and I see it in this industry where, you know, you have what's called a critic's darling, for instance, where, you know, a show like, I never watched it, but a show like Watchmen, for instance, which, you know, I read about it and I was like, I'm not watching this, because I remember reading the original Watchmen series, which, you know, kind of taught me how to read comics in a way. And it's just, I'm like, you're creating the show and catering to an audience of people that is very, very small. But they don't realize that it's very, very small because they're inside the gin and they're speaking to each other. And, you know, the way I try to explain to people, and it's tough because they think that you're some kind of weird conspiracy theorist if you bring this kind of thing up. But it's like, okay, there's a small cluster of people. How many people do you know become media personalities, become famous journalists, become famous athletes, singers, actors? You know, how many people do you know become college professors? And you have this small cluster of people that are generating so much of the conversation. And, you know, whether it be on Twitter or Facebook or in the pages of Variety or Slate or Salon or the New York Times or any of these other outlets, it's a small cluster of people that have an outsized reach. But this small cluster of people is highly concentrated. It's full of, you know, these activists, I guess you could say, that are doing the loudest crying. So then the rest of the gin reacts and they say, well, okay, we have to generate whatever content or material these people want, because this is where the culture is going. But they don't understand that the culture is being driven by this small cluster of people. Now, you know, when you leave the bubble of a New York City, for instance, you come, you know, whenever I travel out of it and I'm just down by more regular people just, they don't care about this stuff. They're either apathetic, or it's weird to them, or they just want to have a good time and see a good story. And I think that's what's being lost. I think these people really think that because, you know, Stephen Colbert or Trevor Noah or all these people are saying certain things about society, that's how it is. It's like, well, no, only 20% of the population is even on Twitter anyway. You know, it's very specific demographics that are on Twitter, and yet they're driving so much of the cultural conversation, and that cultural milieu, or whatever it is, bubbles up into the entertainment industry. And I think there's a distortion in on what people are really, really wanting from their entertainment now. And I think, you know, I mean, even something like Quibi, for instance, the new platform that failed miserably, you know, they tried to have, I mean, I think it's a step in the direction of the industry trying to recognize how people are consuming content now.
Right.
But, you know, at the same time, it's like people rejected it and people just didn't watch it. And I think it says a lot when you have these huge productions that are going on a platform like Quibi. You have big name actors and people getting, and again, the gym is elevating people for, award consideration for shows on Quibi. But I think people are saying, well, I have my phone. I'd rather just watch a PewDiePie video or a Gothic's video or, subtweet this and, or scroll through Twitter. That's what I'm going to do with my phone. I'm going to watch this YouTuber talk about things that's unfiltered, uncensored, so to speak, and as opposed to just this high budget production thing. If I want that, I'll go and watch an actual series or I'll go to the movies. I don't want, I just think that there's a huge disconnect between, where people in general are actually going and what these activists that are in the industry, these various industries want. There's just going to be a bubble. I think it's going to pop eventually. And people are just going to be like, no, I'm not watching this crap anymore. It doesn't appeal to me. But what I will watch is this person playing a Let's Play of this random 80s game that that I haven't heard of. There's so many more options now. So I don't think we can really afford to keep alienating people like this the way that we have been.
Right.
Do you think it's ever gonna like go away? Or do you think eventually all the media and directors are gonna say, I'm just done with this? Like, if you look at like Quentin Tarantino, like he just constantly just makes what he feels is right. His movies are a little bit controversial because you get a whole bunch of white actors saying the N-word, and people are just like, well, that's how it was back in the day. If you want your movie to be more legit, you gotta play this role. And like, would anything change? The main question is, do you think maybe down the line is going to go back to where it's just cater to our actual fans? And stop listening to these people who are saying, oh, well, why X, Y, Z? I'm just going to listen to people who say, I'm going to watch a movie because you know what I like.
Well, I think that this is what I was getting at before. I think I don't think that's necessarily going away, just because it's the kind of paradigm or worldview or ideology, the kind of ideas that you're talking about there are so pervasive in the industry proper. What I think is going to happen, what I hope happens, again, I referenced the comic book industry again. I think there's going to be a bunch of people who are going to just kind of go their own way and say, we're going to go to Kickstarter or Indiegogo and we're going to raise money for our own projects. The way that, for instance, alternative media is really undermining and taking the thunder out of, what we call, I guess, traditional or legacy media. I think Hotep Jesus actually said this on Subtweet, which I agree with. The future is going to be content creation. Like in the golden age of Hollywood, you had, these studios who they contracted actors and their lives were very tightly controlled, but they got a guaranteed salary. And they had, publicity departments to help clean up the actors' messes. And so, none of their lurid stories, or the fact that Rock Hudson was gay or whatever, like none of that would make its way into the papers. Now, of course, we have social media and all access to all these stars. And, with a lot of these people, I think to myself, well, if they weren't in a movie right now, I really wouldn't care if they had an Instagram or not. And my attitude is that fame now, the value of fame has plummeted, because it used to be where, fame was for the glamorous, for these people that were cut off, or elevated above society and protected in a way. But now, a tweet can make you famous. We have mediocre looking Instagram models who have millions of followers, for no other reason than that they can do squats, with their ass in front of the camera. So,
it takes a lot to do those squats, right? That's content.
Stop simping, bro. So, I hope she sees us, bro.
But she will see it. She will.
But I think that what's happening is that I've long felt that the movie star or the era of the movie star is dead, and the franchises are the star now, as opposed to the individual actors. And I think what's going on now is that people are following. They're going to follow a Gothics. They're going to follow a Marcus Brownlee. They're going to follow a PewDiePie. They're going to follow, these different personalities. And I think that's what's going to happen, is that individuals will say, I'm going to create my own projects outside of this system, because the system as it exists right now is simply too restrictive. It's too narrow. It's too ideologically rigid. I mean, one of my favorite movies of all time is It's a Wonderful Life. You want to talk about me ugly crying? That movie will get me. But Frank Capra, who wrote and directed the movie, was a conservative Republican. And I didn't know that until a few years ago. But, it's a movie that opens with a bunch of angels talking to each other. One of the main characters in the film is a guardian angel. There's a huge sort of Christian element underneath the film. And I'm an atheist, but I love that movie. So it doesn't matter what people's ideological framework or underpinnings are. If the story is good, people will gravitate toward it. And I think that the more people understand that, the more people will just kind of break off and, from the industry and see, like, I don't think they're going the right way, and create their own projects. The only issue, of course, I think will be the performers, the various unions, which, stop me if you heard this one before. The unions might be an issue. But I mean, outside of that, to answer your question, I just don't think that it's going away, partly because of the sort of people that are drawn to the arts in general, or to the performing arts in particular, and the culture of the industry as a whole. But again, I just think that people are going to break off, similar to what comics are doing, and musicians as well. They're going to find other avenues via the internet to distribute their works, and they're going to find audiences. They may not become millionaires, but I think they'll be able to make a good living. Just, I'm thinking to myself, podcasts and a blog, and my own projects, or performance-based YouTube channel, with people who are willing to donate or patronize me, or commission new works or whatever, because we can do that now in a way that we couldn't 20 years ago. So yeah. I think that's where it's going. I hope that's where it goes, because I think there's a lot of people, and I think this is part of a bigger cultural malaise that I see, that, even the Marvel movies, which I love, I mean, they're reviving stories that are decades old anyway. So there's not very much that's new that's being done. I think a lot of people feel it, and I think it's just going to be up to independent content creators to really move us in a different direction.
So I got a question for you, unrelated to acting and politics and all that stuff. I remember seeing you tweet. You were tweeting at some of the same folks that I find myself tweeting at, and it's usually these blue check mark individuals who tend to have a big position when it comes to like critical race theory and like the overly woke race ideology. I believe there's one individual that you were debating her on with I think it was when the comment in terms of like the Cubans are not real Latinos or something of that nature. I wanted to know, what do you think about critical race theory in general, or do you have opinion on it? Do you find, like, what is your view on that?
I believe the individual you were talking about is Nicole Hannah Jones, who is one of my favorite people on on the internet. I'm sure I'm one of hers. But I think the people that are pushing this ideology, first of all, I don't think they really understand what it is that they're pushing. And again, I think it was Hotep Jesus that brought this person up, but Manning Johnson, who wrote a book called Color, Communism, and Common Sense. You can find a speech of him online, and he says a lot of the same things that he says about the NAACP back in the 30s, the 40s. To me, still apply to a lot of these so-called black activists. I think Glenn Laurie the other day called them people with three names. I'm like, it's kind of funny. They do mostly have three names, like Nicole Hannah Jones, Melissa Harris Perry, Michael Eric Dyson. It's all these same kind of people. And I think that they're dangerous because they're on a crusade, which again, I think is quasi-religious, and they won't be swayed from it because they've been told all their lives that the world is a certain way. And I think what is rarely discussed is that these people actually have a huge financial incentive for the world to be as divided and as messed up as it is. I mean, I think one of the ironies of someone like Miss Hannah Jones is that she's being elevated and boosted by the very same white establishment that she claims to rail against. Or an Ibram X. Kendi or whoever. I mean, these people are benefiting from these institutions that they want to tear down. So knowing that people work from incentive or respond to incentives, it just seems quite odd to me that people would be entrusting these individuals, these blue check market individuals, these critical race pushers or whatever, to solve the problem, because so much of their financial well-being and so much of their affluence and so much of their careers bank on there being a problem. So I feel like I have more faith in people who are saying, okay, look, we have to start where we are. We have these disparities, as far as achievement, educationally, or professionally. What can the people do to solve those problems? And I feel like the people who are the most ardent proponents of critical race theory, for instance, or I guess a progressive worldview in general, are loath to, because part of their issue is that they see society as the problem and not people themselves, even though people make up the society. their whole focus is on changing the society, and looking at people as collectives, not as individuals. And I'm like, well, you have to start with the individual, because we're the people that have control over our actions. And I think that what they're pushing, it allows people to languish in learned helplessness. And there was a point that I made a decision. This was back in 2007, where I mentioned this earlier. I said, I'm not going to let myself use my race as a crutch for everything that goes wrong in my life. And I'm going to view myself as a human being before I view myself as a demographic. And if someone else has a problem with that, they could be a Nazi or a Klansman, or they could be some woke white liberal who's arguing with me about who's flabbergasted that I don't think that he's racist. This is a true story, by the way. This actually happened. Someone was trying to convince me that they're like, you don't think that I'm racist? I'm like, why are you trying to convince me that you're racist? Like, why are you so invested in this idea that
that's so odd, dude?
It's so weird. But that's what I mean.
Want to be racist? He wanted it.
He was shocked. He was just shocked by this. But I just, my whole thought about critical race theory, I mean, it's under that umbrella of, I mean, can we use the M word, this Marxist kind of worldview and ideology that's really not about helping Black people. It's about using Black people as cudgels to accomplish some other ends. And I don't think that these people really understand that. And it doesn't make you some kind of right-wing conspiracy theorist. It doesn't make you some kind of, tinfoil hat wearer. It's just an observation of, how these ideas that they're pushing were generated in previous eras, and seeing what the parallels are. And that's what we're concerned about, when we rail about these things. It's not that we don't want to help Black people. It's that we think that what they are doing is causing more harm than good. And, I don't quite know how to stop these people other than, argumentation might work, but I think either ignorance or just ridicule is going to be the best way. Or, James Lindsay said this. I messaged him, months ago when everything was kind of blowing up, and he said, it's going to be artists and comedians that will have to kind of carry things forward, because, that's where you have your satirists, you have your people who are able to tap into people's emotions and change minds that way. And so that's what I mean. I think there's going to be independent content creators, and established comedians are also kind of carrying the torch the way forward, that are going to have to change the culture.
I think the one thing that kind of irritates me is the hypocrisy that a lot of people who push this critical race thing, they do it, and from what I've seen, they get a lot of support for it. Nobody questions them. It's just like, let them do it. But then someone on the other spectrum that's like, all right, let's talk about self-accountability. Let's talk about perseverance. Let's talk about like believing in yourself or something like that. That is the thing that's frowned upon, which is really bothersome to me.
Yeah, you're anti-Black for thinking like that.
Yeah.
For having self-accountability.
Here's an even big, here's one of the things that, I had to deregister from the Democrats, because I feel like they're pushing a lot of this stuff. I mean, when you have a demographic where, something like heart disease is one of the number one killers, even beyond, violence or homicide or anything like that, how can you, in good conscience, especially in the time of COVID, still say that body positivity or fat acceptance is a good idea when Black people are dying from diabetes? I have high blood pressure that runs in my family. I've been able to control it thanks to health and nutrition. But, I see these articles, if your man lifts weights at the gym, he could be a right winger. And it's just like they're creating all of these sort of barriers and parameters that you exist inside of. But but they're pushing these ideas that are directly contradictory to the health and well-being of Black people. I mean, that poster that the Smithsonian put out, the African American Museum in the Smithsonian, if you remember, about whiteness, it's things about like rugged individualism, punctuality, discipline, hard work. These are elements of whiteness, and I'm like, this is some of the most racist garbage I've ever seen in my entire fucking life. And it used to be where it was only, when I was a kid in a more working / poor upbringing, it would be the other Black kids who would say, you're doing your schoolwork, or you dress a certain way, you're trying to be white, whatever. But now it's filtered up into these educated classes where, I'm sitting there arguing with Black people who have PhDs about how striving for financial success and is just striving for whiteness. I mean, talk to a Nigerian businessman and see how he feels about that, or a Japanese businessman. I mean, it's the strangest thing that the people that have, and I think people really need to take a look back and say, who are these kinds of people who are pushing these ideas that are deliberately leading to not only the economic, but the spiritual immiseration of Black people? If you're talking about, public health, being fat is not a good idea. And how do Black people have the best athletes, but the worst health outcomes on the planet? It doesn't make any sense. If you're talking about STI infections among Black women, it's super sky high. I'm a pro-choice individual, but abortion rates are also super sky high. I mean, this is according to the CDC. So what do you see coming from, I guess I'll call it the left or whatever? It's, it's sex positivity, which, there shouldn't be shame attached to sex, but there's reasons why, there's social stigmas around certain, attitudes and activities. There's the broader point that I'm making is that the people that are getting the most public support and the most money, they're receiving awards. I mean, Ta-Nehisi Coates is another one. These people are actually making money off of the immiseration of Black people and putting forth ideas that will, I think, contribute to their further suffering. I think it's a sign of a sick culture when you have people like us who are saying, you should really read more, and you should go to the gym and take care of yourself, and you should have a family that, not until you're established, that you can take care of, and you should watch out for yourself and your community, and it's just like stuff like discipline or showing up on time and being punctual, but they're looked at as negative things, or you're trying to be white if you talk about it. I mean, it's very, there's some kind of a spiritual sickness or some kind of emotional sickness, that is really bothersome to me. And I think it's so deeply embedded and so deeply ingrained. I'm not sure how you get out of that ditch, to be honest. It just seems to be so. There's so much investment now in the idea of Black people as helpless victims, that outside of being your own best personal example that people can follow. I don't know, what else you do to combat that.
So it's funny that you brought up those points, with us being like the best athletes, but then we have such horrible stats when it comes to like disease and whatnot. With fitness with you, was it something that you just kind of always believed in, or was there something more involved with your craft that you developed more into? Because I see on Broadway, I don't know, I kind of feel like actors in that space kind of more of like an athletic build from what I notice when people are in that. I work backwards. So as far as Broadway,
a lot of people don't understand the amount of energy it takes out of you to do a show 8 times a week, whether it's Hamlet or it's Hamilton. Like the typical Broadway chorus. They're singing and dancing. It takes a lot of energy to sing and, obviously dancing. And you're in these theaters of, 1,000 seats, whatever. And you have to have the chops and the stamina and the physical conditioning to be able to night after night, sometimes 2 show days. The show that I did on Broadway, it was about 2 hours of just nonstop. You're projecting your voice over laughter. You have these really dramatic moments where you have to be loud and you have to be heard. You're physically exerting yourself in a myriad of ways. And so you need rest, you need relaxation, you need to take care of yourself. And so that's why when you see Broadway performers, they are in really good shape because they have to be. It's a part of their job. You can't not be in shape and do 8 shows a week. I know from the side, it's like, well, you're working nights and weekends and, what's the big deal? But you're using all of yourself from your head to your toes to make these shows work and to entertain people. And it's a lot of work. But for me, fitness, it was kind of weird because I had a really bad breakup. And, right when I was coming out of grad school. And it was one of those things where I was like, am I going to...
Hold on. Don't you come at me sideways.
Nicely done. I turned on my battery saver. That was not a good idea. But I had this really bad breakup. And this was 2009. I had just gotten out of grad school. And it was in the middle of the recession. And, it was a really hard time. And then I ended up booking this job at a theater in Kansas City. And at the time, I was like, I've never really been ripped. I was always a really skinny kid and just kind of lanky and tall. And so I bought, LL Cool J has a book called The Platinum Workout. And I recommend it to everybody. It's really readable. It's got a lot of great information in it. And I just started hitting the gym and training weights. And after a few weeks, I started seeing these changes. And I was like, wow. But on top of all of that, and again, this goes back to what I was saying before about high blood pressure, which is when I was 25, I was prescribed medication for high blood pressure. And my mother took the same thing. My grandmother took the same thing. And I asked the doctor point blank, is it normal for somebody my age to be prescribed this medication? And she said, no. So after 10 years of working out and eating to match my goals, my levels are normal now. And it wasn't only that shift in terms of my health, but it was also a mindset shift that occurred as well. And, I think this also helped feed into my political transformation, because now there's this idea that, men who are into fitness are toxifying their masculinity. And the more I found that I leaned into my masculinity, A, the happier I was as a person, and B, the more I worked as an actor. So, it just became, it's sort of, and the more attention I got from women, which is kind of funny, as opposed, I spent all this time deluded that they were, these non-superficial creatures that were just better than us. But no, you're scumbags just like the rest of us, Vanessa.
Damn! Wow. All right.
But that's the human condition, though. You know what I mean? Like that's just who we are. And my current job, I see it as well. Just men and women, how we get along, how we interact, and you're never going to suppress that. That's why I have an issue with a lot of these COVID restrictions. But that's a whole other podcast. But it's so the fitness thing. To come back to your original question, it was sort of organic, but the benefits that I began to see from it, just were such that I just kept going with it, and and it's changed my life for the better in a lot of ways. So it's really irritating to me when I see people who are like, well, being fat is okay, and it's like, we know it's not. We know it's not, and especially for Black people, that we know it's not. It's one thing to say you shouldn't shame people for being fat, because you don't know what the story is behind that.
Right.
There could be a variety of stories behind why that person is overweight, and some of them are really tragic and sad. So don't insult people that way. But to tell me that I'm a bad person for encouraging other people to get thin. I mean, look what happened to the reaction to Adele. People were just like, guys, congratulating her on losing weight is fat shaming. And it's like, no, it's not.
That whole situation got me a little upset, because it's like, people don't understand, like, as you get older, your body starts to change. And when doctors are telling you, like, listen, you're overweight and you're almost at the level of being obese, you should really change up your diet. It's seen as like, oh my God, how dare doctors tell me I'm obese and not love me for my body. And for Adele to make changes like that, she saw that something was wrong with her health and she needed to make the change. The same thing for that other actress, the woman who was in Pitch Perfect.
Or Rebel Wilson.
That's her name?
Yeah.
She started losing weight too. She started losing weight too because she was like, my health. Like at a certain age point. Oh, what the heck was that? No, what the hell?
Something fell down. So I'm listening.
Like,
Let me.
At a certain age point, it's just like your body just starts to change and it can't do the same things. Like we're all getting older. Like me, I can't do like a lot of things I used to do at 20, 25. So imagine me being a 40-year-old guy out of shape. It's like going up the stairs, I get winded. Like I don't want that.
What can't you do since you were 25?
Bend over, apparently.
Like my bones don't listen. If you had the audio, every time I move my arm, my rotator cuffs.
I don't want to hear that shit, because this is what you were doing in the mosh pit at TwitchCon. You were doing this shit.
Yeah.
So that's a lie.
First of all, I just saw Clifton's arm and that thing was bulging. You're telling me you can't be like that now?
Yeah.
I could be like that. You see that? You see that? That's what I could do. But the thing is, what I'm saying is like,
stop objectifying me, you guys.
So here's the thing. So we're shaming people for changing their lives, their health. What is going on with the world when somebody sits there and goes, okay, I like my body, I don't feel comfortable right now and I have a lot of health issues. Like, yes, I love my body, but I have health issues. Let me make changes to my diet, get fit, and let me do it for me. Why is it automatically a problem for the rest of the world? Look at Jonah Hill. He went from a funny fat guy, then he got skinny. Everybody's like, he's not funny anymore because he was fat. He was funnier, fatter. Then he got big again, and people are like, oh, he just did that because of this. Now he's just like, I don't fucking care. Like, what do you want from these people? like they're only funny because they're fat, and if they're saying they're only funny because they're fat, that's fucked up.
Well, it's one of these things where they advocate for a certain thing, but in their advocacy, they show that how bigoted they actually are. It's like it's. I mean, maybe making too big a thing of it, but just the idea that someone is no longer funny because they're fat. They're really saying that they find fat people hilarious. Because
I know, right?
You just reversed it. See?
You probably just people watch it probably just blew their minds. They probably just calculating everything. Like,
they go like, no.
I mean, do you think anybody sitting at home being like, Chris Rock, he's too skinny to be hilarious? No one's done that. No one has ever done that. But the people who are complaining about other actors losing weight, it's like, come on, man, just you're revealing your own narrow-mindedness and your own bigotry. So just
like look at Fat Joe. Fat Joe lost weight because he was like, yo, I saw what happened to Big Pun. Big Pun was heavyset, and he died from that. Like. Fat Joe was like, yo, I don't want that to be for me. In the Latino community, we eat a lot of fucking a lot of foods, fatty foods and stuff.
What's Joe's name now? Is it just Joe?
Oh, you mean, yeah.
Shut up.
It's just Joe.
God.
No, because that's the singer. That's the R&B singer. We can't use the same name.
I see.
It's
Okay.
just average Joe now.
Just
Wait,
average
you can't
Joe.
even use that now.
It's average Joe.
Occasionally rap Joe. Oh no. Like.
Okay, shut up. So we've been recording for about an hour, so we're gonna wrap it up. We can start to wrap it up, but I did have a question for you. As an actor, what is your stance on Cuomo's Emmy nomination?
Well, thank you for another episode of Subtweet
THIS. Here's the. I think it's disgusting. I think it's despicable, and I think it's dare I say deplorable. Any other D words you can think to throw in there. The destruction of New York. I mean, and I know Bella disagrees, but maybe I'm looking at it through the lens of just the industry, because I feel like a lot of them have just sat back and said, we want to be bailed out and we want money from people that we've despised and alienated for the past 5 years. And to see someone like Andrew Cuomo, who, to give credit where it's due, I mean, he's an extremely shrewd politician. And I think anybody, in contrast to the chaos that is Donald Trump, anyone who's able to sound somewhat collected and somewhat calm, is going to look better by comparison. That said, I've been astonished by the fawning coverage of Andrew Cuomo. I've been astonished that he's able to lie and mislead people. And one of the reasons that I knew I had to leave New York, I saw this press conference where this reporter asked him a very reasonable question about the economy of the city, and he snapped on her and went on this tirade about how one life, death is worse than a bad economy, as if having a bad economy will lead to less deaths. You know what I mean? And he was just like, you want a job? Go become an essential worker. Go get a job. How many nurses do you know can get a job just becoming a nurse in inside of a week? How many mechanics can just go and get a certification in a few days? Just get a job. You know what I mean? And so I found his reaction to this perfectly reasonable question to be so unhinged and so indicative of this rigid moral framework that I said, this man will justify, this is back in May. I said, this man will justify anything because, in his quest to quote unquote save a life, which is ironic because he tweets out every day the people that are dying from COVID. So whatever measures you're taking, they aren't even working anyway. So your most basic edict of I'm going to save a life isn't even working. But I said, he will justify any action that he takes because he's saying, I'm trying to save a life. And I said, that's dangerous thinking to me. I need to leave. And, people aren't asking really questions because he's a Democrat and New York City is overrun, is overwhelmingly blue. Why is no one asking questions about why we had these multi-million-dollar facilities that were converted in Brooklyn and Queens to handle a hospital overflow? They were barely used before they were dismantled. We had this hospital ship which was barely used before it was sent away. But yet at the same time we're increasing these restrictions, to slow the spread or not, so the medical systems isn't overwhelmed. But then he has an interview a month ago where he's talking to CNN and he says, our hospital systems were never overwhelmed. Our emergency hospitals were never overwhelmed. He says it unequivocally as he's lying about, his nursing home order, which led to the deaths of thousands of people. And I don't really like the sort of right-wing framing of, he deliberately sent people into nursing homes to kill them, because that's just that's a little, I don't like Cuomo, but that's a little too diabolical for my tastes. But I still want to know, what was the justification behind making this executive order, which was then scrubbed from your website, by the way. So what was the justification for that? And then, you hear this leaked phone call. He's talking to these rabbis, these Jewish leaders in the community, where he's saying, this is not a nuanced response. This is a fear-driven response. So you look at his Twitter account, he is ratcheting up the very fear that he is using to justify his continued imposition of these strict measures. So the fact that he's handled this so badly, at the beginning of the pandemic, he said unequivocally that the city was prepared. And I guess he was wrong about that. I don't know. So the idea that he is being filleted and selling a book, no less, for all of his failures, and he's being vaunted. And so now my industry wants to give him a fucking Emmy award for this. I think it's disgusting. And it's just an example to me of how these otherwise mediocre people, he's very shrewd. Again, he's very intelligent. So I got to give him that, as a politician. They're awarding him for his television press conferences, during which he said things like, this is a European virus. Motherfucker, we know it's not. We know where the virus came from. And he keeps saying this lie. It's a European, like we know. And again, this is how shrewd they are, because technically there was a mutation of the virus that then came to the city. Yeah, but we know it originated all in China, and it's not racist to say that any more than it's racist to say that the Ebola virus is an African virus. It's unbelievable the level of the level of willful, self-imposed ignorance that people are able to generate in order to fillet their own or venerate their own heroes because they have a Democrat after their name. This dude mismanaged this entire. I'm just a guy with internet access, but I was able in January to say, wait a minute, there's a virus coming. Let me get prepared. Let me stock up on food. By the time I left in June, I still had canned goods and gloves and masks that I bought in February. So if I'm just some guy, how come our administration, the Cuomo administration, the de Blasio administration, who are out telling people to go to the movies and to ride the subway, by the way, no one ever talks about that. So, they helped spread the infection. No one wants to talk about that. So to answer your original question, it's the idea that this person is receiving an Emmy award. To me, it's indicative of the ideological rot inside the industry. It's indicative of these willful blinders people have on, their inability to see beyond party affiliation. It's completely reasonable. We understand that you don't like Donald Trump. That's fine, but to throw your support behind a party which features mayors and Democrats which looked the other way when their cities were being destroyed, or which looked the other way while people were being sent to nursing homes and dying. I think you really, really have to take a moment to examine yourself and figure out what your priorities really are, what your principles really are. I've been saying for weeks now, I think many of these people, their principles are shaped by whatever headlines they happen to read that fucking day. Yeah. There's no consistency in what they believe, and just the idea that someone like Cuomo is pretty much he became anti-vax this year. He was like, we're not looking at this vaccine if it's coming from this administration. I'm like, dude, this is what so-called anti-vaxxers have been saying like for years now. They're saying like we have issues with the safety and all this other stuff, but now it's okay to be anti-vax in the mainstream as long as you're anti-Trump. There's so many things that just they're mind-boggling to me that people can't see the contradictions, or they don't care about them, or again, just because it's a tribalistic game. It's like, okay, yeah, Trump dropped the ball in a lot of ways, but so did just about every other leader in the Western world when you're talking about confronting COVID. And Andrew Cuomo is no different. You can give him the benefit of the doubt and say like, well, this is an unprecedented situation, and New York City poses some very specific challenges in terms of containing a virus, obviously. But to pretend that he's some kind of a hero, to me, it just really calls into question. I think we have very different definitions of what a hero is, and Cuomo is not it.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's receiving an Emmy for it is so, it's infuriating to me, and I think it's disgusting.
I found it funny that he said that become an essential worker, and so you could stay employed. And when
Just
you
like
said
that.
they feel like essential workers are immune, I am considered an essential worker because I work in the construction field as I'm a general contractor in safety and construction, and the amount of hoops the construction industry has to jump through to even stay open. Like, people don't see like that we have to apply for permits. We have to apply for special business affirmation so we can stay open. Then we have to deal with the Department of Buildings, who makes up all these rules and everything that they don't even know half the time. They don't tell to all their workers. And it's funny because here's the freaking the hypocrisy of everything. So the Department of Buildings put out rules saying you should have a plan, a COVID action plan. So, screenings to come to the job site, you got to take your temperature, tracking guys, and all this la-di-da stuff, But when the DOB inspector comes in the job site, you can't take the temperature. They're exempt from you taking the temperature. So yes, because I watched the medic try to take the DOB inspector temperature. He goes, "We're exempt from that. We're exempt." It's like, oh, so if I was to say this about this worker coming in, you shut my whole job site down, right?
Huh.
So, but you're exempt, you fucking idiots. And if we didn't do this, you'll give us a $1 million fine or whatever and shut us down. Because right now, New York City, how they getting their money back is from fines and tickets. And nobody's seeing that. You know how many times I've gotten a parking ticket for being parked somewhere where I've always parked before? They're like, oh, you're getting a ticket. Like, I never got a ticket here. Oh, well. But at the end of the day, all the shit that they're doing and setting up is not helping, it's just hurting people. I get you want to keep New York busy and get money and revenue coming back in. I understand that. But at the same time, a lot of people are dying. A lot of people still have to go to work. You're not stopping landlords from collecting rent. Credit card collectors aren't stopping collecting. All the best they're doing is no late fees. Where are we supposed to get money from?
Well, you have to talk to the leadership. That's what's funny. You see Cuomo, who later on in the year admits that, I think he said 50% of their taxes come from the rich people that are fleeing the city. But then Bill de Blasio says, we're not going to, this man wanted to be the president, for God's sake. Bill de Blasio was like, we're not going to listen to what a bunch of wealthy people and millionaires want. It's like, okay. So part of the, if you want to call them benefits of living in New York City is there are a bunch of social programs. I myself as an actor have been on unemployment many times, where does the money for these programs come from? If you want to be a sanctuary city, where is the money to, support those kinds of, for the resources to support, these kinds of policies? And, but they're chasing any sort of revenue stream that they can out of the city. And I see no justification for it. It's just very strange that they seem hell bent on destroying what really is one of the greatest cities in the world. I'm not one of those people who thinks that, New York City is dead and it'll be gone forever. I know we talked a little bit about this, when I sat down, but it's New York City, so I think it will bounce back. It's just a matter of how long that's going to take. And, until Bill de Blasio leaves, he's a lame duck mayor. That's the worst thing about it, is that he'll suffer no political ramifications for anything he's doing right now because he's not up for re-election. Cuomo, on the other hand, who, gave an interview where he said, these measures could last for another year. He said that. Conveniently in time for his re-election, by the way. If I were to return to New York, it's going to be at least a year because I think these people need to be out of office. This includes the city council, the DAs, all this stuff. There's so much rot, and you were talking about, all the red tape you have to go through. There's so many things in the city, they're turning it into San Francisco, and nobody wants that, so it's I don't know. I'm speechless about it. It's when you see a place that you've lived for 15 years and it's been such a huge part of your life, and You see how it's being destroyed. And on top of that, going back to this Emmy Award, you see how your colleagues are rooting for the destruction of your city and your industry. It's arguable to me that Broadway and theater are essential businesses for New York City. It's unique in that way. I think so. In terms of the revenue that it brings in, the businesses that it brings in. If you're in the theater district in Times Square, all these restaurants, these souvenirs and gift shops, the tourism that Broadway attracts, the restaurants that, patrons and actors themselves go and visit, I think there's an argument to be made about that in terms of the makeup of the city. And, people just want to, instead of sitting back and saying, bail us out, there's an argument to be made for with safety measures, okay, we can get back to work and make this thing happen. But no, instead they sat back and just allowed their industry to be killed from the outside. And I won't say cowardice to me, but it's something along those lines. So it's the 1-2 punch of the city being destroyed, as well as the industry that many consider is integral to that city.
Woo! Well, I'm glad I don't live in New York. That's all I'm gonna say. Even though people seem to think Rhode Island is a part of New York. Yay!
Wow, thanks, guys.
Send me a postcard.
I'm gonna cough on it too and send it to you.
Thank you, thank you so much.
Atlanta's nice.
Is it? I've never been.
I like it. It's definitely a chocolate city, and I appreciate that. We didn't really get into it, but it's the level of the level of camaraderie. But I see young and old Black people, entrepreneurs, and who are just artists, professionals who are going after it to go get it. Whether they're illustrators or musicians, they are hustling and trying to make something happen. They're small business owners, they're professionals, and they help people out. That's what's so great for me to see. So when I see these other people who are, I guess you call them race hustlers or whatever, who are saying all these bad things about, the inability of Black people to strive, I'm like, dude, the Atlantans are they're killing it right now. It's really inspiring to see. It's fun to be around. So but it's not as great as New York, I guess.
Well, I'm gonna have to go visit Atlanta someday whenever 6 feet distance is not a requirement. But in any case, let's wrap it up. Clifton, thank you so much for being on this podcast. I want you to go ahead and let everyone know where they can find you, but I'm going to ask, you can either do it as your normal self, or at the beginning of the show, you started to do a little bit of an impersonation of Morgan Freeman. So I'm just going to put it out there that I really thought that was cool, but let everyone know where they can find you.
Well, if you're going to put me on the spot, I can be. It's. Oh God, I can't. When I'm stoned, I do amazing impersonations. just so you know. So that's how you. But that's how you know I'm sober right now. But if you want to find me, I can be found at Clifton A. Duncan on Twitter. I can also be found at Clifton Duncan online at Instagram. I also have a YouTube channel, which I haven't really done much yet, but I want to build on that as well. And right now, that is where you can find me, although stay tuned for future projects, because as I said before, the future is going to be in the hands of the people that decide that they're not going to be a part of the system anymore and create their own things. So be on the lookout for projects driven by myself.
Awesome.
Nice. We definitely will.
And it was a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much, Clifton. And remember, everyone, make sure to hit that follow button, hit subscribe wherever you're listening to this to, and we will see you next time. Bye.
All right.
Goodbye.